It's hard to deny that things seem to be unraveling for Durk, whether it's the feds piling up evidence, the alleged sloppy trail left behind, or the constant public scrutiny. This isn't just one isolated situation anymore. This looks like a pattern, and it's starting to paint a messy picture. Sure, he proved the song wasn't made after Lil Pop's death, but skeptics still question the timing, edits, and intent behind it. Whether fair or not, it fuels the perception that he's leveraging controversy. That lawsuit claiming he profited off FBG Duck's death only adds more fuel to the fire. And honestly, it's hard to brush it off as just haters talking when these legal battles keep stacking up. The details coming out of Lil Pop's situation? Wild. If what's being alleged is true, this might be one of the most careless setups we've seen from someone in his position. An OTF credit card for flights on the same day of the murder? Text messages explicitly telling someone not to use his name? No burner phones, no effort to separate himself from the situation. It's almost as if he thought being a top artist made him untouchable. Now, let's not forget how this works. It's up to the feds to prove guilt. But even if he comes out clean legally, the damage to his reputation is already happening. Every headline, every piece of evidence, every lawsuit just makes him look worse. And the thing is, when you're at the top, people are watching. You had to know this. So for the feds to accuse him of moving this sloppy is both shocking and, frankly, disappointing. This isn't just about the music anymore. It's about legacy. If he doesn't tighten up and start moving smarter, this could very well mark the beginning of the end for him as the untouchable figure he's been in the industry. Look, it's hard to ignore the mountain of evidence stacking up against Durk, and the timing here is just too convenient to overlook. Plane tickets, communication, his name tied to it all in such a reckless way. If the feds are right, it's not just sloppy, it's downright stupid. You got a guy at the height of his career, living the dream, and he's allegedly still tangled up in street messes? It's insane. What's wild is that Durk had a chance to be the example. He had the opportunity to be the one to break the cycle, to step away from that life, and put his people in positions where they could elevate. Instead, he's allegedly still playing in the same dirty game that made him a target in the first place. The fact that his credit card is linked to the flights, that he's allegedly texting people on the same day as the murder, telling them not to use his name, it paints a picture of someone who thought they could just keep playing in both worlds. And that's exactly the kind of mentality that leads to downfall. People talk about rap beef, about the street ties, but at the level Durk is at, he should have been gone from all of that. The opportunity was right there in front of him. But instead, he chose to get caught up in the very mess he's supposed to be rising above. And that's the real tragedy. He's giving his friends and family opportunities, but they're still stuck in the same mindset, clinging to that street life. The crazy thing is, he's not just throwing away his career, he's potentially throwing away the chance to give him a real way out too. I'm not saying he's guilty, but it doesn't look good. We've seen this before. People make a ton of money and think they're untouchable, and then it all falls apart. What's more frustrating is that Durk could have walked away from all of it and been the man who changed the narrative for himself and his crew. Instead, it feels like we're watching the slow-motion downfall of someone who couldn't leave that life behind. Someone who thought the streets would just let him keep winning. The whole Durk didn't pull the trigger argument? Sure, technically he didn't commit the murder, but that's the bare minimum, and it's such a lazy way to justify his involvement. At his level, you're not just some bystander in the chaos happening around you. You're involved, whether directly or indirectly. Your name is tied up in the situation, and that comes with consequences. You don't get to act like you're untouchable when your credit card's funding flights for people linked to a murder, or when you're texting on the same day someone dies telling people not to use your name. That's not the move of someone who's completely innocent or above the drama. That's the move of someone trying to cover their tracks after the fact. People are quick to defend him by saying he's not the one who pulled the trigger, as if that erases all the other factors that lead up to the event. But think about it. If you're the one providing resources, helping people set up logistics, and enabling the situation to go down without being a direct participant, you're still part of it. You might not be the one holding the gun, but you're creating an environment where that violence is inevitable. That's what makes these types of cases so sticky. It's not always about who physically did the dirty work. It's about who's responsible for orchestrating or facilitating the whole thing. And that's where the gray area comes in. Then, there's the issue of accountability. Durk might not have killed anyone, but that doesn't absolve him from everything else that's in the mix. It's a huge mistake to ignore the fact that his actions, or lack of action, could have made things escalate the way they did. He could have been a leader, someone who chose to pull out of the street life and focus on the music, but instead, he allegedly got caught up in the very mess he should have been leaving behind. And the more information leaks out, like the text messages and the OTF credit card used for flight bookings, the more it makes him look like someone who thought he could play both sides without facing the consequences. But that's the trap people fall into. You can't live in the streets and then pretend like you don't have ties to everything that happens in them. Let's talk about the legal side of things. The idea that he's innocent until proven guilty is true, but let's not act like there isn't a ton of circumstantial evidence piling up. The whole argument that it's not on him to prove he didn't do it is such a cop-out. It's not just about proving a direct link. It's about establishing intent, connections, and whether his actions played a part in setting everything in motion. Just because there's no smoking gun doesn't mean there isn't enough to make things look incredibly suspicious. The feds are going after him for a reason, and it's not just some random case. They've got their sights on him because his involvement, whether intentional or not, is so tied to the people and the events surrounding the crime. So when people defend him by saying he's just being dragged into it, that's naive. He's a grown man making decisions, and every choice has consequences. If he was truly innocent, he'd be staying far away from the mess, not allegedly texting about flight bookings, not allegedly getting mixed up with people who are actively under investigation. The reality is, if you're in the spotlight and involved in situations like this, you're never just a passive observer. You either choose to rise above it, or you keep sinking deeper into it. And at this point, it's hard to ignore the fact that Durk might have sunk himself too far into the muck to get out unscathed. Ultimately, whether he's legally guilty or not, there's a deeper question about his decisions. And no matter how much legal defense he throws up, the damage to his reputation is already being done. He might be able to fight the case in court, but the public is already forming its own judgment. That's something that's going to follow him, whether the case is dismissed or not. People see this as the downfall of someone who had the world at his feet, but chose to double down on the wrong side of his life. It's a shame, really, because he had the chance to be bigger than this, and now it feels like we're watching him throw it all away. In summary, the situation surrounding Lil Durk looks messy, regardless of whether or not he physically pulled the trigger in the murder case. While it's true there's no direct physical evidence linking him to the crime, the circumstantial evidence paints a troubling picture. Durk's credit card allegedly funded flights for individuals involved, and he was reportedly texting the day of the murder, telling people not to use his name. Actions that suggest he was far from innocent in the situation. People defend him by focusing on the fact that he didn't kill anyone, but that overlooks his indirect involvement and decision to stay tied to street life, despite having the opportunity to rise above it. Durk's position as a high-profile artist should have given him a chance to break free from these messy situations, but instead, he allegedly got caught up in the very drama he should have distanced himself from. His actions, like being involved with the people tied to the case and allegedly trying to cover his tracks, suggest he might have been more involved than he's letting on. Even though he hasn't been proven guilty yet, his reputation and the public perception are already being impacted by the constant legal battles, lawsuits, and the growing mountain of evidence against him. At the end of the day, it's not just about whether he's guilty of the crime itself. It's about his choices and the people he surrounded himself with. His decisions might be leading to his downfall, as he appears to be stuck in a cycle he could have escaped, and now it seems like he's losing everything: his career, his reputation, and possibly his freedom. That concludes today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're alerted whenever a new video drops. It's completely free and helps out the channel tremendously. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.